Hi, I'm Tessa with Brainrot News, here with a few bits of public accountability for you to choke on like a reheated promise of better days. Today we're talking about town halls, those warm, fuzzy relics of Americana where democracy allegedly shows up to shake hands, kiss babies, and pretend anyone gives a damn about what you think. In the mythology of American civics, town halls are the holy grail of grassroots democracy, a sacred space where regular folks can stand up, wag a finger at their Congress critter, and demand justice, pothole repair, or the heads of their ideological enemies on a decorated pike. Let's snap out of the romanticized visions of revolutionary fervor and look at town halls in 2025, deep in the squalid sequel of the Trump presidency. Unfortunately, they're currently the Democratic equivalent of a group therapy session where everyone's screaming and no one's listening. These events have become less about democratic dialogue and more like combustion rallies, where policy is secondary to spectacle and anger is the only acceptable form of civic engagement. Gone are the days when town halls were participatory crucibles of policy debate. What we have now is weaponized theater, where the closest thing to legislation is a congressman nodding solemnly while someone demands to know why their taxes are funding private religious schools instead of public education. In this episode, we're digging into how these forums morphed from grassroots governance to grift stage confessionals for the collapsing American psyche. We'll trace the lineage from New England-style direct democracy to modern town halls that function more like a heavily surveilled open mic for the politically desperate. It's a lot less like evolution and more like erosion, the slow grinding down of public power under the weight of donor cash, corporate capture, and bipartisan indifference. As Trump-era paranoia smothers public discourse with a red, white, and blue weighted blanket, town halls have become the battlefield where hope goes to be gaslit. The illusion of participation persists, but it's all cosmetic. You can scream all you want. The soundproofing was installed years ago. We are headed into the guts of American town halls, where civic engagement has been taxidermied, mounted on a wall, and labeled still alive.
Brainrot the news.
Part 1. How public forums got neutered. Before town halls were sad little stages for performative democracy and viral YouTube meltdowns, they were the crown jewel of New England's theocratic HOA meetings, known as open town meetings. Born in the 1600s among Puritan settlers who fled religious persecutions just so they could start doing their own persecuting, these town meetings became the bedrock of local governance. Picture a bunch of guys in buckle hats furiously debating the tax implications of Satan. These were the democratic gold standard, at least according to Jefferson, who called them the wisest invention ever devised by the wit of man, which tells you a lot about the state of invention in the 18th century. Alexis de Tocqueville, America's favorite French hype man, saw them as the foundation of liberty, and historian Christopher Collier claimed it was the most democratic form of government one can imagine, which is technically true if your imagination runs on gentry-class male privilege and zero indoor plumbing. Credit where credit's due, these meetings weren't just bitch fests. They had real power. Citizens, meaning landowning white men with enough free time to argue for hours about fences and tax codes, could directly vote on legislation. They decided budgets, passed bylaws, and built the myth of the rugged, self-governing American town like it was a founding father's idyllic portrait, delivered just before the next witch trial. By 1691, Massachusetts had turned the town meeting into the final word on local law. When the British Parliament tried to shut them down in 1774, calling them unwarrantable dens of democratic sedition, it became crystal clear that these forums weren't just about local roads and goat ordinances. They were engines of resistance, grassroots pressure cookers where the idea of American independence started boiling over. These radical democratic experiments had a few minor exclusions. Women, slaves, and even landless men could all go fuck themselves. If you didn't fit the narrow mold of a respectable male property owner, you were scenery. The votes themselves were often publicly declared, like some puritanical episode of Survival, ensuring that if you did have the guts to speak out, you'd be judged by your neighbors, your pastor, and probably your cow. The town meeting was a direct form of lawmaking, but only for the right people. Everyone else got democracy the same way they got clean water, inconsistently and with a high risk of disease. This is the rot at the root. The democratic ideal in America wasn't born perfect and corrupted later. It was built on exclusion, designed by elites, and preserved through myth. That matters because when we romanticize these forums as paragons of civic virtue, we ignore the reality that they've always been sites of contested power. The ropes have changed, but the gatekeeping remains. Contemporary town halls may not be explicitly male and property-based anymore, but the same power dynamics persist, rebranded, refined, and buried under layers of institutional gaslighting. The struggle for genuine inclusion is just Act 2 of the same old play. Part 2. A brief history of yelling while white. As American towns grew, and people started realizing that yelling about tax rates in a candlelit barn didn't scale well to cities with actual plumbing, the open town meeting model went the way of powdered wigs and tolerable presidents. The system of everyone voting on everything gave way to something far more convenient for the rising managerial class: representative town meetings. Why let everyone vote when you can elect someone to ignore you professionally? Places like Amherst, Massachusetts, and South Hadley figured this out early, trading in their open democracy for a filtered version in the early 20th century. Brookline, a town of nearly 60,000 people, still clings to a modified version of town meeting government to this day, presumably out of nostalgia or morbid curiosity to see if direct democracy can survive being smothered by bureaucracy. This was a quiet revolution in how citizen power gets laundered. The original model put actual decisions in the hands of the people, as messy, loud, and dangerous as that may have been. The new model makes you feel like you're participating without ever threatening the sacred stability of elite consensus. The modern congressional town hall is a polished relic of civic engagement, reanimated sometime in the 20th century to give voters a designated place to scream into the void. You don't get to vote on anything, and there's no legislation on the table. It's just a glorified Q&A session, like a Reddit AMA, but with more shouting and zero upvotes. This format became campaign gold in the age of TV optics. Richard Nixon kicked it off in 1968, and Clinton turned it into a full-blown performance art piece. Since then, town halls have become so common that members of Congress have held over 25,000 in the last decade, none of which have passed a single law, but several of which have gone viral on Facebook after someone called their senator a fascist to their face. This is political performance art. Lawmakers show up, microphone in hand, and pretend they're listening to your concerns while nervously eyeing the exit. Constituents get a turn at the mic to unleash 5 generations of rage into a 2-minute monologue, while the staffer in the corner live tweets it for engagement metrics. It's a show, and like all good theater, everyone's playing a part: the concerned citizen, the engaged representative, the watchdog journalist, and the off-camera billionaire donor who wrote the policy 6 months ago. The whole cast is here, except the role of actual change. The evolution of town halls from legislative bodies to glorified suggestion boxes is often explained away as necessary, since there are too many people, too few seats, and the issues are too complex. In actuality, it's strategic delusion. It's the slow professionalization of politics with participation rebranded as feedback, voting replaced with venting, and governance transformed into a kind of stage-managed customer service nightmare. We have replaced direct power with input. Lawmakers gather feedback like they're middle managers reviewing Yelp scores, all while maintaining the real decision-making behind closed doors, ideally with a PAC and a few industry consultants present. This new model has a name: performative democracy. Its defining feature is that it feels like participation, but produces nothing. Town halls are now less about deliberation and more about optics. Nothing more than media opportunities where the real currency is how many shares your angry speech gets on TikTok. It is the illusion of voice without the burden of accountability. This spectacle isn't free. Representatives now serve exponentially more constituents than they did a century ago, which means town halls are less about dialogue and more about damage control. Every question is a potential headline. Every angry voter, a possible donor for your opponent. Some politicians have started skipping them altogether, preferring the safety of staged calls, pre-screened Zoom meetings, or better yet, just not answering at all. The public square, once a crucible where civic heat forged collective will, has been replaced by a stage for ritualistic dissent. Constituents still queue up and deliver their impassioned monologues, but their words are just data points for a political machine that calculates optics, not consensus. Part 3. No loitering, no yelling, no democracy. Now, let's get to the part where the curtain gets yanked back and we see who's actually pulling the strings. And surprise, it is not the nice town hall volunteer with a clipboard. Welcome to the bloated, champagne-soaked world of elite theory, where democracy is technically alive, but only because the elites are weekend at Berniesing it for tax breaks. Elite theory is a brutally accurate lens for understanding how modern nation-states actually function. The gist is simple. Real power is concentrated at the top of the manicured hands of CEOs, billionaires, Wall Street goblins, and the guy who runs the think tank that no one voted for, but still sets federal policy. These elites bankroll the campaigns, chair the foundations, and write the white papers that get faxed into oblivion until one of them becomes a bill. They all went to the same 3 schools, vacation in the same 5 islands, and donate to the same 10 super PACs. The result is a hermetically sealed ruling class with shared interests and zero initiative to let the peasants do more than yell into microphones at town halls with broken air conditioning. Elite theory laughs in the face of pluralism. Pluralism Liberalism imagines a grand democratic tug of war, with every citizen pulling. Elite theory simply observes that the other end of that rope is wrapped around a gilded capstan, firmly anchored to a private island. The price of admission to influence is staggering. If you wanted to run for office, you better hope you've got a hedge fund in your corner, and if you want to push a policy, you better be backed by a lobby with its own zip code. Meanwhile, average citizens can barely afford the time to understand what the hell is happening, let alone organize against it. This, then, is where the illusion of access truly shines, in the grand performative civic charade of town halls. These meetings are billed as sacred democratic rituals, modern agora, where public will is heard and weighed. In reality, they're PR pit stops for lawmakers and a cozy feedback loop for people who already know how the system works and benefit from its inertia. You can speak, but no one promised to listen. The problem isn't that our institutions don't know what the people want, it's that they do not care, at least not when it conflicts with the interest of the donor class. Ideas like Medicare expansion, universal childcare, or stronger environmental regulations routinely face down a lobbyist whose sole purpose is to kill them in committee, a lobbyist who earns your 5-year salary in a single week. Lobbying is how elite interests get translated into law. They call it consultation, but bribery might be more accurate. If you can't afford a consultant, good luck influencing anything beyond your local PTA. These corporate whisperers have access, money, and an open calendar. You have a town hall and a 2-minute limit. Even when citizens do manage to get organized, when they show up in mass to demand justice, equity, clean water, or to end whatever fresh hell Congress cooked up that week, they are often met with the same tired deflection that they're actually professional protesters or paid agitators, and this is a George Soros operation. Nothing says, "I understand your pain," quite like accusing your constituents of being sleeper agents in a billionaire-funded LARP. This rhetorical tactic is akin to counterinsurgency. It reframes legitimate dissent as sabotage, painting desperate people as enemy combatants in the war against status quo capitalism. It shifts the spotlight from grotesque policies being protested to the decibel level of the protest itself. How dare you be loud while we take away your healthcare? When that happens, the town hall becomes a farce, a simulacrum of democracy, and a hollow ritual where the ruling class stages an engagement session, gets politely roasted by the audience, and then retreats to Capitol Hill where the real decisions get made, usually after a lunch with a telecom executive. Town halls no longer serve as mechanisms of accountability. They are a release valve, a controlled environment where the heat of popular anger can be vented without lighting any actual fires. And when that pressure gets too high, there's always a fallback plan. Delegitimize the protest, dismiss the rage, and keep the wheels turning. After all, nothing calms a restive public like reminding them that polite requests are the only legitimate form of dissent. Just don't expect anything to change unless your portfolio has more zeros than your zip code and your last name's on a university wing. Part 4. Public input denied. By 2025, the town hall's evolution is complete. From democratic forum to pressure release valve for the dispossessed, citizens, facing the stark realities of lost healthcare and vanishing retirement, are directed to pre-approved microphones, their voices projected to a screen or a sparsely attended room. Their elected officials, often visible through a pixelated webcam or insulated by security, observe from a safe distance. It's an engineered spectacle of managed dissent. Presiding over this meticulously orchestrated civic deterioration is Donald Trump, the reanimated corpse of American fascism, now unleashed with a renewed mandate and a complete disregard for decorum. His second presidency has turned the volume up on everything: the rage, the stakes, and the feeling that we're all trapped inside a collapsing Denny's during a gas leak. Town halls, once sleepy meet and greets for octogenarians and the occasional angry vegan, are now flashpoints of public fury. They have become rage theaters, live-streamed proof that people still give a shit about the smoldering ruins of their democracy. Yet, even this farce scares the hell out of Republican leadership. Their answer to our fury is to just stop showing up. The GOP has advised its members to stop holding in-person town halls. Why face your constituents when you can ghost them via Zoom? The age of tele-town hall is upon us, fully curated, tightly managed, and as interactive as a corporate training video. It offers all the warmth of customer service hold music with none of the accountability. The protests haven't stopped. People are confronting lawmakers over Medicaid cuts, mass deportations, school closures, food insecurity, and yeah, the techno-feudal lords like Elon Musk who seem to have direct access to the Oval Office. If you listen to politicians like Harriet Hageman, however, these protests aren't citizens, they're organized disruptors and paid chaos agents. The GOP's strategy here is clear. Don't engage or explain. Just smear the opposition and vanish into the fog of war. Who needs a town hall when you can simply declare your own constituents a domestic threat? And now, we've got signs at the door stating no yelling, no standing, no passion, and no humanity. Rules that read more like a dystopian kindergarten than a democratic forum. If you shout, you're out, and if you cry, you're irrational. Oh, and if you're angry, you must be some kind of plant because normal Americans simply nod along while their insulin prescriptions bleed them dry. This is how you sterilize dissent and neuter public rage. You weaponize civility, not as a standard, but as a muzzle. The powerful love civility. It's polite, predictable, and it doesn't spit blood on the floor or ruin a campaign photo op. Unfortunately, when your healthcare is being gutted and your retirement is being stolen, civility is a luxury you can't afford. Demanding calm from the oppressed is not a plea for peace. It is a demand for their quiet surrender. Civility becomes a tool of control, a way to reframe moral outrage as poor manners, and a way to dismiss suffering as hysteria. If you scream while your kid's school shuts down, you're the problem. And if you demand to know why your town is underwater and FEMA is nowhere to be found, you're being uncivil. It's a neat trick. If the people stay quiet, they're apathetic. But if they raise hell, they're radicals. The empty chair serves as a quintessential symbol of 2025's political landscape. It signals the representative's absence, even when the public is present and speaking. Behind the scenes, policies are finalized by those who've never faced the impossible choice between essential medication and food. Even in deeply Republican districts, the illusion is cracking. Constituents are openly pushing back on military spending, on creeping fascism, and on corporate welfare. On the left, pro-Palestinian protesters and climate activists are storming Democratic town halls. This means no politician is safe, no institution truly trusted, and that is a healthy skepticism. We can no longer be blind to the financial and political allegiances that pull the strings. Town halls have not been killed. They have been hollowed out, drained of meaning, stripped of teeth, and rebranded as pageants of non-confrontation. The governing class has turned the last real space for public accountability into a stage-managed farce with strict rules and a mute button always at the ready. The people still come and still refuse to be quiet while their lives are dismantled. That rage, that refusal to go quietly, is the only thing standing between our fragile democracy and a corporate necropolis. Part 5. Echo chambers with admin controls. In 2025, the town hall has gone virtual. Lawmakers, terrified of real human beings with real human emotions, have found their perfect hiding place, the internet, and they're selling this retreat from reality as progress. They say it's accessible, inclusive, and efficient, like your boss telling you layoffs are streamlining operations. Their revamped solution is universal access. Balancing kids or pulling a double shift is no barrier. Even with a post-pandemic immune system made of tissue paper and regret, a Zoom link is your ticket. California even rolled out something called Engaged California, which sounds either like a civic tech initiative or a Netflix original about a polyamorous commune. These programs promise the usual: respectful dialogue, honest conversation, and listening outside election cycles. A phrase so loaded with bullshit it should come with a smell warning. Underneath all the jargon and pastel UI design, the reality is clear. Accessibility has replaced authenticity. Virtual town halls are not the answer to democratic dysfunction. They are a sterile hologram of civic life. We should not even pretend these events are equivalent to a traditional town hall. They're more like live-streamed press releases. They are fully curated, moderator-filtered, tone-policed forums where nothing unpredictable is allowed to happen. If a constituent wants to rage about Medicaid cuts or immigrant deportations, that question gets banned faster than a nipple on Instagram. What used to be raw political theater is now a heavily produced infomercial. Lawmakers can pick their questions like they're ordering from the dollar menu. The spontaneity, the confrontation, and the uncomfortable truths are all gone, replaced by a democratic experience that feels less like participation and more like watching a live stream of your house burning down while the fire department sends you a chatbot response. Virtual town halls are about control. Control over who speaks, over what's said, and over what isn't heard. It's about optics. You can't boo a pre-recorded answer or chant in a moderated comment section, and you sure as hell can't hold a laptop accountable. Even lawmakers admit it, sometimes proudly. They say they are avoiding confrontation, chaos, and professional protesters, which is code for people who are mad that we gutted their retirement and gave their tax money to Lockheed Martin. We also cannot forget about the digital divide. Sure, the tech bros love to talk about accessibility, but that presumes everyone has broadband, a device, and enough digital literacy to navigate the maze of government portals. In poor, rural, and older communities, virtual forums aren't opening doors. They are slamming them shut and bolting them from the inside. Even if you can get online, good luck hearing a range of opinions. The algorithm already decided what you believe. Welcome to the era of engineered consensus, where your ideological prison is just one scroll away. The same system that serves you anti-vax memes and NFT scams is now shaping your civic engagement experience. While the screens glow and the connection bars flicker, the people grow more isolated, more cynical, and more aware that the illusion of access is not the same as power. Town halls were never perfect, but they were physical, unpredictable, and real. They forced elected officials to look people in the eyes and explain why their town's only hospital was replaced with a crypto incubator. Now they can just log off. The virtual town hall is a Potemkin village of public input, slick, sterile, and utterly devoid of risk to those in power. It is working, not to make government better, but to make it easier to ignore the governed altogether. Part 6. The Rebirth of Local Power. Just because the town hall has become a digital hostage situation does not mean the fight is over. This is precisely where the true cockroach of democracy, grassroots activism, emerges. It remains undeterred, underfunded, underrated, and somehow still breathing after decades of bipartisan abuse. Yeah, the system is rigged, and federal politics are a screaming vortex of lobbyist cash, performative hearings, and TikTok filters, but down in the muck of local governance, something weird is happening. Shit is getting done. Turns out, if you scream locally, someone might actually hear you. Organizations like the League of Women Voters, bless their never-dying optimism, keep encouraging people to show up, speak up, and not give up. Local governments haven't quite figured out how to completely firewall themselves off from the public yet. While Congress is busy holding AI hearings where senators ask ChatGPT if it plans to run for president, communities across America are rediscovering a long-lost civic technology, each other. Dallas holds budget listening sessions where people can yell about potholes without being algorithmically shadow banned. Denver is asking how buses can actually serve humans. Camden, South Carolina, is running forums titled All Voices Matter, which is either inspiring or the setup to a Jordan Peele film. Mural Arts Philadelphia is turning budget participation into public art. Manassas is resisting development like it's the Battle of Bull Run all over again, except this time the battlefield is a strip mall. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it is mostly ignored by national media, which is exactly why it works. While protest is necessary, it's not sufficient. We've seen the outrage, felt the heat, but you don't burn down systemic injustice with a single tweet. You need infrastructure, relationships, and you need to show up again and again and again until the people in power realize that you're not just mad, you're organized. That's the pivot from spontaneous fury to strategic pressure. Passion is the spark, and strategy is the fire alarm in the mayor's office at 2 a.m. Real change means knowing your enemy and their office hours. It means learning how to ask the questions that make politicians squirm, and printing out your complaint, handing it to a board intern, and following up like you're debt collecting for democracy. Localism is a tactical reorientation. National politics are built for deadlock, but local politics are still salvageable if we act fast. So what do? Focus on the hyper-local, sewer lines, zoning laws, bus stops, and anything that affects everyone and doesn't yet come preloaded with a civil war. Speaking community terms. Instead of yelling about socialism or the free market, talk about the streetlight that hasn't worked since 2017. It's harder to call that woke or fascist. Don't just protest, organize. One angry voice is a nuisance, but 20 organized ones with a media contact list and a PowerPoint is a policy meeting. Use tech, but don't worship it. Apps, portals, and digital calendars are tools, not magic. They will not fix democracy, but they can help you remember when the next housing board meeting is. Get civic education out of the grave. Knowing how government works should not require a PhD. People need to understand what levers they can pull and who to yell at when those levers break. Build coalitions. Find people who care about water quality, public transit, or keeping the library open past 6 p.m. and build a group. Be respectful, relentless, and extremely annoying. Finally, innovative models like citizen assemblies offer a powerful mechanism for structured public deliberation. These assemblies bring together intentionally selected representative groups of community members to discuss pressing issues, with the potential to generate impactful policy recommendations. It's jury duty but for democracy, and it might be the closest thing we have left to actual deliberation. Here's the bottom line. If the top-down system is collapsing under the weight of its own lies and lobbyists, then the only way forward is bottom-up. Meet locally, act locally, annoy your city council relentlessly, and rebuild what they've burned down with the sweat and spite of your neighbors. Because the fight for democracy is not over. It just moved to the school board meeting down the street, and no one's live streaming it. Part 7. Reclaiming the microphone. From the revolutionary town meetings of New England, where white property-owning men got together to debate which poor people to ignore, to the sterilized Zoom calls of today, where public comment is 3 minutes long and muted at will, town halls have always been a mirror of who holds power and who doesn't. In 2025, under the boot of Trump's second act and a political landscape split like a rotting log, that mirror reflects a democracy fraying at the seams. If you've been following along, you have seen how these once promising forums have become theaters of managed dissent, corporate-sponsored circuses, where real questions are dodged, dissent is sanitized, and the illusion of access replaces the reality of power. We are told to be civil while our communities are gutted and told to log on while our questions are screened. When we get angry, we are accused of being threats to the very system that continues to ignore us. Here's the truth that keeps clawing its way through the asphalt. People are not giving up. They never have. Every time a door is slammed shut, someone finds a window. Every time a mayor flees a meeting, someone sets up a table outside City Hall. Every time a virtual town hall mutes a microphone, someone hits record on their phone and uploads the truth anyway. The fight for participatory democracy was never about decorum. It's about power, who has it, who hoards it, and who's willing to take it back. To get there, we need more than polite suggestions and QR-coded surveys. We need to reclaim the entire premise of public participation. We need spaces where people are heard and heeded. We need technology that serves the people, not the algorithmic whims of state-sanctioned moderation. We need to stop mistaking visibility for influence, or token engagement for real control. A platform, a microphone, or being on the agenda are not power. Power is deciding what happens next, and it's not going to be handed to us in a friendly municipal letter. It has to be taken, built, and protected through real organizing, real relationships, and a long, grueling commitment to show up even when it feels like no one is listening. We have seen the blueprints. In city after city, people are doing the work, teaching each other how government actually functions, pressuring officials, building coalitions, and refusing to be divided by the politics of fear. This is what it looks like when people at the bottom start pushing back, when the ignored start organizing, and when the silence starts speaking in unison. It is not flashy, it is not trending, and it will not be covered on CNN unless someone throws a chair. But it's happening, and it matters. At the end of the day, the future of democracy does not depend on what happens in Washington or Silicon Valley or the next disaster live streamed from a congressional hearing. It depends on what we build with each other in basements, on sidewalks, and at town halls. Real ones. The kind they haven't figured out how to shut down yet. That's it for Brainrot News. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe before we get dragged out of a town hall and executed in the public square.